I'm going to talk about some of the new developments that we saw 3 months ago at drupa. Sabina reminded me it was 3 months ago. I think I've just about recovered from it now, so I'm now getting into looking forward to the next one mode. People talk it as being the Inkjet drupa. Well, it's certainly the third or the fourth one that I've been to that was talked about as being the Inkjet drupa. But it was probably more accurately to be described as the inkjet packaging drupa. I'm going to talk about some of the suppliers to the trade and why, or point out the fact that many of them that historically have been doubters in inkjet seem to have jumped ship and are now quite enthusiastic proselytizers about inkjet technology. Because it's a Smithers Pira presentation, I'll provide you with some of our market data and some market data updates. And I'll look a little bit about why inkjet is actually becoming important in packaging specifically, rather than printing. And I'll give you a couple of thoughts of mine on what might happen and what will happen going forward. For those of you who don't know who Smithers Pira is, we're an information company. We do testing and a few other things as well, which is useful when I'm talking about packaging. But we're based in the UK, near London, and in Shrewsbury, and in the USA at Akron, Ohio, which is not where that yellow dot is, but I'm not quite sure how to move that yellow dot on this slide when we moved. And Smithers Pira works with a range of people, and thankfully many of you in this room actually I've been talking to and will continue to talk to, because you know what's happening in your particular sector of the industry. And we have a range of contacts across those supply chains in print, packaging, and technology that allows us to develop our market data and also provide us with some insight, hopefully, and expertise that we sell to a variety of players across the supply chain. And our major product is high-value information, enabling companies to make better decisions quicker. I simplify it. It's helping companies make money is what we do and what I do. We act across the print, publishing, paper, and packaging supply chains. Pira was originally the Printing Industry Research Association in the UK about 85 years ago. And if it started with P, they decided they'd probably try and become experts in that as well. But we do a lot of work on packaging, and we do a lot of work on food contact and testing, which is pretty important when we're talking about inkjet in packaging. As Oliver said, I've been around for over 21 years, well over 25 years now, so I'm going to remain at 25, thank you very much. But I'm a print techie, and I'm interested in printing technology, and I'm hugely interested in inkjet and what it can do and how it can make money for companies across the supply chain and companies that I'm involved with. And I act as a consultant for Smithers Pira, and I write a number of their reports, including the Future of Digital Print for Packaging, which came out last year, and also the Future of Inkjet, looking at inkjet in the printing and packaging spheres. I also look at inkjet in some other areas which we'll touch upon later. But I don't solely work for Pira. I also act as a journalist, so I'm a bit of a media tart, I think someone described me as last night. So I write for anybody who asks me to. And there are a couple of the people up there. And I also got involved, which is interesting today, in a magazine that was started in 2010 by Whitmar in the UK, Digital Labels and Packaging. And if you Google it and search it, it's a business-to-business thing, and it's a useful area in that area. But I also act as a non-exec, so I still keep my fingers dirty, and occasionally I get inkjet ink on them at a couple of companies that I work with. So, what I'm going to be talking about is the Inkjet drupa in 2016. It seemed to create a lot of excitement and a lot of interest and buzz, and it was certainly a fantastic show, lots and lots of things. But I came back and I told my a relation, and she wasn't very impressed when I said I'd been to the Inkjet drupa. And this dog is totally unimpressed that it's the Inkjet drupa, because it's not the Inkjet drupa. It wasn't the Inkjet drupa. It was the print and packaging and technology drupa. Inkjet's been around since 1867. I've managed to track the first patents back to Lord Kelvin and his siphon recorder. It's a tool that printing companies and packaging converters can use to create print to make money. And because it was ubiquitous and everywhere, it just shows that the sector is maturing. And it's one choice that people have of making, putting ink onto paper, ink onto substrates, to create images that will help them push their message across or sell more packaging or sell more goods. It's not the inkjet drupa. It's a mature sector. You're no longer the new kid on the block. We heard about some new kids on the block who are going to be coming and trying to take your lunch. So never mind you trying to take flexo and litho and everybody else's. You're going to be pushed fairly soon by new technologies coming along. But there was a lot of technology at drupa for inkjet. And the thing that I probably took away is that the quality is now very good. It's not an issue anymore. I can't see huge stripes and missing nozzles and the weird and wonderful inkjet artifacts of years gone by. And I claim that inkjet no longer fears the loop. Now, before this conference started, I rather rashly agreed to make a presentation on an inkjet packaging workshop where I trapped 25 people or so in a room and I talked to them for 3 hours. So you've only got half an hour of me this morning, so think yourselves lucky about that. But one of the things I did is I showed them 2 print samples. And I passed them round and I said, can you please tell me which is better, 1 or 2? Now, as an Englishman, inviting people to vote in 2016 is probably not a great idea, but they did, and 7 plus 1, both look good enough is what it says at the top. It said sample 1 was the best, and 22 plus 1 said sample 2 was the best. Now I know that there were a lot of inkjet people in there, and they probably were peering at it a little bit more closely than I thought they should. But sample 1 was printed on a Heidelberg Speedmaster and varnished. Sample 2 was printed on an HP HDNA page-wide web press and varnished. And 22 plus 1 thought that was the best sample. 7 plus 1 thought that was the best sample. Now, I'm not going to say, and even my colleagues at Pira who do the mathematics would probably not allow me to say that that means that 75% of people think inkjet is best. But what it does prove is that when people look objectively at 2 samples, they're both good enough. Inkjet is perfectly happy for the vast majority of applications. Now, I'll talk about packaging applications specifically later on, because there are a few issues there. But that's the message that came out. And a lot of this inkjet technology that was shown is using standard offset grade papers, i.e. cheap and cheerful papers. And inkjet is going to be more popular with printers when they don't have to spend a huge amount of money on a ridiculously expensive substrate to print on. And that was what was being shown there. So that's an inkjet printed sample. It just so happens to be a Lander sample. And if you look at it under magnification, showing it through a presentation is probably not going to demonstrate, but it's not bad. And if you really look at it under high resolution, it's got nice, crisp, clean, clear dots. Great, fantastic, wow. I'm quite pleased to know that. When I showed it to real people who aren't in the printing industry, they thought they were very good. Bright, colourful, clear, crisp. And the printed packaging samples I saw are perfectly saleable. The technology is capable of delivering the results that printers, and more importantly, their customers want. And on standard papers. We saw a huge amount of interest in packaging, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, in particularly corrugated. And there's a very good reason why corrugated is seen as a target for inkjet printers, because it's relatively easy. The quality levels are not fine art reproduction, but there's a huge, huge volume of it. Next time you're in a supermarket, just look at the amount of corrugated. And if you happen to go to Aldi or Lidl, there are huge amounts of corrugated. And they'd like it to look nice, please, with a message on it for the consumers. We also saw the embellishment drupa. So I was very amused to see Zycon and HP Indigo, the bastions of toner printing, certainly in labels, putting inkjet units on their toner label presses to do clever things and get new results out. So the embellishment drupa was there. Everybody who was supplying engines supplied new engines. They were going faster. They were going more reliable. They were opening up new opportunities. They were linking into workflow better, making them simpler to use. What they are really doing is they are lowering the unit cost of production of inkjet. And when a printer or a packaging converter looks at a technology, that's one of the key things they always look at. The real price of inkjet is lowering, is falling. And even the people who are maintaining very high ink prices, even some of those are starting to relent a little bit and are coming down. And as they do, and as that packaging technology and that printing technology becomes more cost effective, it'll be much more widely used. So some highlights of the new drupa developments. Well, many of you may notice this shy retiring chap with the Lander technology. I went and had a look at it over in Israel. And I don't know if it's going to work until they get the machines into the field and they're properly proven by printers and packaging converters. It's not proven yet. But I'm certainly less of an unbeliever than I was. Seeing these things run at 200 meters a minute on a web, a meter wide, running it on sheet fed at up to 13,000 B1 sheets an hour, delivering pretty good quality. Hopefully, from the technology perspective, it's going to work, because the cost set structure of this technology is very interesting. It was also being shown on the Komori booth, and Komori, traditional sheet-fed litho manufacturer and web litho manufacturer, are also pushing this and pushing it well, and it's one of the reasons I think that the technology is going to work. Although this chap who won my award for the most miserable sod I saw at drupa probably wasn't quite so impressed by being close to that technology. It was interesting, in Hall 1, Heidelberg, their prime space of their show, was the Prime Fire 106, a B1 inkjet machine. Just so happens to use Fujifilm Samba heads, which are the same ones being used by Lander, even though they won't tell you, but they are. In there. So the big offset gorilla in the room is now selling inkjet. It was selling inkjet before through its Gallus operation, but it's moving on. The B1 inkjet sphere was pretty bare before drupa. There are lots of them there now. This is the CM1 from Konica Minolta. It's not available yet, but it's another B1 machine. The interesting thing about this is it's a totally flat paper path, which will open up new applications. For example, putting ink onto metal is a possibility for them, if they want to. As well as corrugated. When they found out what was happening with the corrugated market, they talked about corrugated as well. Lurking behind all these people is the Nozomi, which is a 75 meters per minute, 1.8 meter print width for post-print corrugated from EFI using UV inks. Should be available sometime next year, possibly late next year. Barbaran, well established in the market for industrial coatings, laminates and things like that. Their Jetmaster 1260, potentially up to 2.31 meters wide, single pass inkjet printing. Durst Row Pack, Durst Row 130S, another post-print corrugated flat sheet machine. Interesting ink technology here. It's water-based UV, so it's a combination using water as a diluent, allows them to get a much lower build, much lower final film weight, a bit more complicated in the drying, but the quality looks very good and not like traditional, if I put inverted commas, UV. Drupa is not really a label show, but there were a few label presented in, and the one that caught my eye was the electron beam capabilities, which is the first time I'd seen that running on a PPSI dice unit using Collins, or Cow Collins, as I must now learn to call them, electron beam curing ink. benefit electron beam, eliminating photoinitiators and taking one of the potential areas away from food and contact migration issues. I didn't actually manage to get to the Think laboratory site, but this is a narrow web flexible packaging press developed by a Japanese company using inks from cow. I don't know too much about it apart from the picture of it. But there were some other very interesting flexible packaging developments there. This is a Uteco flexo press, and it's got a range of Kodak stream heads on it, 7 colors plus a couple of varnishing units. This is running at 200 meters a minute, and if you go onto the Kodak booth out there, they'll show you what it was producing. Very high quality on 20 and unsupported BOPP films. Very interesting indeed for the flexible packaging market using water-based inks, so no potential problems there. They also had their UltraStream technology there, and the UltraStream is very, very good indeed in terms of print quality. They're looking for partners to develop it. The continuous inkjet ink has a benefit over many other inks in that it doesn't have to have the same level of humectants and controllers to keep the ink open in the head. That means that when it hits the paper or the substrate, there are lots of things there that don't need to be in the ink that will damage the printability and performance there. The quality is very good. Go and have a look at it. The other highlight from drupa is nothing to do with packaging. It was on the Canon stand, the Canon Voyager. And this is a B2 inkjet engine designed for the photo book market, very high quality imaging. But like Lander, this is an offset drum device. So you print the inkjet ink onto a belt around a drum and then transfer it from the drum onto the paper. Doing that solves an awful lot of ink-paper interactions. And I think you'll see a lot more of those coming onto the market over the next few years. If you track the patents, there's quite a few people looking at this. So those were the highlights for me, and forgive me if I've missed anybody out, of the new stuff at drupa. But there's also a lot of new stuff not actually shown at drupa. So you have KBA with their Varijet 106. This puts a Xerox inkjet unit into their B1 repeater press. Initially developed and designed for packaging. Should be available next year, and I'm hoping to go and have a look at it later this year. In Japan, Fujifilm developed the Yukon technology. Now, this has got a name like MJP183S or something, but it's a 540 millimeter wide flexible packaging press, and they've put 6 of them so far into converting plants in Japan. The interesting thing about this is it uses a 2-pack UV system. So it lays down a priming unit, which I think contains, they won't tell me exactly what it does contain, but I suspect it's some oligomers and some of the high viscosity components in the ink. They then inkjet ink on top of that, and it combines with the primer, and when you cure it, it gives you a full through cure under nitrogen to get rid of odor and taint issues. As with many Fujifilm developments, it's originally been pioneered in Japan, and at some stage may well come out later on. Also using Kodak technology as an imaging device is the rather boringly named Inkjet corrugated press from Bobst. This is a monster. It's about 70 or 80 meters long. I can't remember because I was walking past it when I saw it in the MEX showroom. I didn't realize I was walking past a digital press, so I wasn't really paying attention. But this will handle sheets 1.3 meters wide, 2 meters long, traversing down a vacuum belt at 200 meters a minute, putting a primer, 4 colors, and an optional coater on the end of it, and delivering cut sheet, post-print corrugated. There are 2 of these in the field. Bobst is the market leader in packaging equipment, and they don't want to sort of break the market and make sure that the technology is working. They're a very conservative organization. HP showed their page-wide C500, another corrugated machine for post-print. As a concept, it wasn't at the show, but the technology they are using in that is their thermal inkjet that they use in a range of machines, including the T1100S, which is 2.8 meters wide, running at speeds of 183 meters per minute, If you do the sums, that works out at 50,500 A4 4-colour prints a minute. This is the biggest digital press I've seen so far. It's huge. I was at an event over in Chicago a couple of weeks ago, and there are converters and corrugators desperate to get their hands on the 5 that have been ordered so far. When these get into the market, they'll change it significantly. So where have all the unbelievers gone? This is a range, and it's in no particular order, of leading companies making printing equipment in print packaging applications. And when I would talk to them a few years ago, they'd say, oh, well, Inkjet, yes, it's all right, but it's not really, it's a toy. It's not really real. It's not really what we want. But they seem to have changed their minds, a lot of them, at drupa. And all of this lot, and a few more down the bottom there, are now promoting and selling and providing inkjet. Technology as a solution. Why are they doing that? Well, I'm going to share some market data. You can get the slide later on, so I'm going to flick through the first bits. But I'll look at some forecasts. And this is in constant dollar values. And this is the value of the output of the inkjet sector. And we size it at the moment somewhere around $55 billion globally. This is for print and packaging. It's nothing to do with home and office, and it's nothing to do with textiles or industrial. That big chunk in the middle is signage and display, which dominates from hundreds, if not thousands, or tens of thousands of flatbed and wide format presses going across there. But you can see a range of applications. Packaging is that little bit at the top, the blue labels becoming significant and almost noticeable in there. This is the same figures, but in terms of their volume, in terms of A4 prints. Nice, strong growth. And that's why you're all here, because you've got compound annual growth rates 3 to 5%, and there aren't many of those going along in the print world. If we look at it geographically, it's everywhere across the globe. Europe, North America are actually growing, which is even rarer in the print field, I will tell you. And there's a lot of the reason that you're here as suppliers is we see significant volume growth in inks, particularly in water-based, which seems to be the process of choice for very high speed, i.e. very large ink guzzling machines. And I heard yesterday about a system that will try and deliver a ton an hour. Well, it may not be inkjet as such, so there may be a little bit of upside in those figures going forward. And in terms of the equipment, we split them into high-end single pass, wide format, narrow web, sheet fed, flatbed, and general bespoke systems. We think the market's somewhere around $4 billion is the end user pricing for equipment. It's not going to grow hugely strongly, predominantly because these machines are getting faster, quicker, cheaper, which is very good news for the end user. But it's a significant business for the print industry. Right, well, I'm going to have about 5 minutes on that. So we'll talk a little bit about packaging. And inkjet is very interesting in the packaging sphere because it lets you do new things. A whole raft of new things you can do. But I'm going to just talk about a couple of interesting ones. And that is, it can do short runs more effectively. In craft beers, adult beverages, as they talk about them in the States, there's a huge volume increase in the number of breweries in the UK, in the number of breweries in the United States. These are small companies. They want high quality, high volume packaging. Digital inkjet is significantly useful for them. This guy runs a company called Colorcraft, and they're based in Burton in the United Kingdom, and he makes beer labels. But he also makes the fitments that go on the beer pumps. His average run is 45, and that's 45 of those fitments. How does he do it? He's got a couple of VFI Jetrin presses running chug, 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 all the time with laser cutting on the end of it to do high volumes, because there's a lot of these beer pumps in the UK, you'll be interested to know. And with Brexit, there's probably going to be a few more of them, I would think. But doing inkjet, making new businesses, spotting a niche, and developing it. Now, we've all seen Share a Coke, and I know Share a Coke was not done using inkjet, although it was originally in Australia, which is where it was proven and worked. And interestingly, even though HP don't tell you, in Germany and Switzerland, the vast majority of the Share a Coke bottles were printed on Heidelberg Speedmasters, and they then collated the sheets afterwards to get the mix of work. So it doesn't have to be digital, by the way. But it's emotion and engagement. You can do new things with packaging. So that says, beautiful Eloise, will you marry me? Well, it's a strange way of proposing to your betrothed, but I believe she just did. But it's not just Coke doing silly things like this. Walker's Crisps, chips if you're American, linked into a Facebook page, undeniably David Daly's. Well, I can understand having my name on my packet of crisps might stop my kids from taking them. I very much doubt if it would, by the way, but it might. But this lady decided that she would make a proposal again. So people are sort of using packaging and digital packaging to propose to each other. This is engagement. This is above and beyond what you can do with original things. And brands and retailers are understanding this, and they're taking it forward. So you've got people asking them to marry you on a crisp. Well, I then found personalised dog food. And I thought, after how many hundreds of generations we've come to this stage, you can put your dog's name on the tin of dog food. And I thought, this is absolutely ridiculous. But I talked to them. And the company is Just Right. They're part of Purina, who are part of Nestle. And they told me this is the most powerful message there is about engagement. It has the brand, Just Right. It has the dog's name on it. It has the owner's name on it. And it has a picture of the dog. And the dog might even like the food. And they said that you cannot believe the amount of engagement they have with dog owners and pet owners by doing this campaign. So, in my house, we share it with a couple of dogs. One of them is called Raffles. So I go onto the internet, and they asked me some very, very searching questions about my dog's habits and various other things, and they came up with his blend. And there he is with his name on it. And it's, I didn't tell them who I was, so I'm you and Purina. But the interesting thing is this bit down here. £24, $62.99. Now this dog eats the most expensive dog food that my wife can find in the UK. This stuff is 50% more expensive than that. So fortunately, you can't get Just Right dog food in the UK, a lot of it. But it's engagement. It's what the brands and the packaging can do. And this is being enabled by Inkjet, and it's being enabled by that. This is apropos of nothing at all, but as I trawl through to look at things, I found this in the United States. So you can now get dog water, would you believe, ladies and gentlemen. Right, well, I'm going to finish off now and just touch on beyond the graphics and packaging sectors. And as we all know, inkjet is being used, textiles, decor, laminates, electronics. Now, I was in Korea a few weeks ago, and there is an arms race in the display market between Samsung and LG. LG Display invested $8.7 billion in a new OLED process. This seems to be, from my understanding, a big sector of Korea, and inkjet is one of the key enabling technologies in this development. They compete with Samsung, 3 trillion won. There's a lot of inkjet going into that. That 3 trillion won, $3 billion, give or take, follows another 2 billion that was announced at the start of the year in displays, using inkjet technology as a new thing. It's not just displays, electronics, healthcare, 3D printing, I'm not even going to touch on, and biomedical applications. There's also inkjet being widely used in a range of weird and wonderful promotional items. And you can't even get away from it when you die. If you want the KISS casket, for those of you who are devotees of the US rock band, Gene Simmons himself says, "This makes dying cool," which I'm not quite sure if I would agree with. But we're seeing it getting everywhere. Now, I'm quite often asked what I think is going to happen with inkjet. you'll see significant volume growth. We revise our figures every year. We will be upping them with the new technology and the capabilities and the take-up that's coming through. But what you'll find is that your customers, the end printers, the packaging converters, will get their holes on this technology, and they'll start doing stupid things. Now, some of them will not work and will be total disasters, but one or two of them will. And they'll be good ideas. And they'll then get that technology into the hands of their customers who can do things with it. And they'll say, oh, I like that. And then someone will copy it. And then someone else will copy it, and someone else will buy the machine. And before you know what's going on, by using the technology, you can do print in a new and innovative way, adding value to the end users. And they like that type of thing. And before we know what is going to be happening, they'll be copied, and it will be the norm. And inkjet is going to be a key part of the future of the printing and printed packaging areas. So I've taken half an hour of your lives. Thank you very much indeed for that. Anyone has any questions?
Thank you, Sean. Sean, very quickly, two questions. One is, you've talked a lot about different developments, people doing water-based UV machines and technologies with indirect printing using offset-type technology. Do you think all these new ongoing developments are going to survive, or will there be a sort of a few that are going to stick out based on the growth rate that we have? Is there place for all of them, or?
I think that not all of them will survive, but the ones that work and will do things in new ways at new cost levels will find opportunities. And there will be new ones that we haven't even thought about will come onto the market. It's a nice field, lots of developments, and it's changing very rapidly. And the winners will very quickly become observed, and everyone will talk about them.
And the other question that I received was, what is your opinion on inkjet printing on polyurethane like PE or PP in packaging, especially using water-based ink? When will this type of technology be available at higher speeds, say 200 up?
What speed is high speed? 200 meters a minute?
200 meters a minute plus.
Well, if you talk to Kodak, they'll tell you can have it now. You're having to use priming down there, but the samples, and very kindly at the workshop, I didn't get the samples back, but I know that Kodak have some. Go and talk to them and you'll see it.
So it is available pretty much now, with some priming added to it, obviously.
They're using priming at the moment, okay. Yes. And I suspect that's going to, but on standard packaging substrates.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.